The devil, who wants to destroy our lives, seen that I was a bit fearful about things, and he had me trapped in fear for a number of years. Because I was living 1 foot in, I really wanted to be living for God, but I was also 1 foot trying to impress others around me because I was afraid of what they would think if I was really living for God. This young lad will speak to thousands. Hello everybody, my name is Nathan Johnson. Most of my life has been spent here in the Wild West of County Fermanagh in Northern Ireland, just on the border between the north and the south. Life for me started 34 years ago. My father was a policeman up in Armagh, so I was born in Craigavon, and my mum had me when she was young. Life wasn't easy because she couldn't drive. It was before mobile phones. She had moved away from home, and my father was away at work a lot of the time. And so she was raising me, and then my sister, she was born just over a year after I was born. And so mum raised us, and I want to pay tribute to my mum. She did an amazing job. I think my wife would agree with that. But my mum gave her life to raise us. I do have another sister, but she didn't come along for about 12 to 13 years after. So most of my childhood was spent, me and my sister, we had a very simple childhood. But I guess for me, I was so blessed because both my mum and my dad were Christians. Because we spent most of our time with my mum, she was the one who really showed us what faith was. She was the first person I seen praying, the first person I heard singing to Jesus. She was the one, if I was to think who first showed me what a Christian was, it was my mum. And so from a very young age, I heard about the good news of Jesus. I heard that Jesus came not to die on a cross for the things he had done wrong, but for the things I had done wrong. And let me tell you, no matter how good a person people may even think I am out there, folks, I know what I'm really like inside. And I'll tell you now, if all of my thoughts and all of the wrong things I had done was put on the screen in this video, I'll be horrified and would leave the country. We all have done things are wrong, and I was told from a young age that because of these wrong things, that I was separated from God, but that Jesus died on a cross and took the punishment for all of my sins. And I remember as a young boy hearing this, and I would hear it every week at church. I would hear it at Sunday school. I'd hear it at children's clubs. It was everywhere in my life, which at the time I thought was normal. But as I look back, I was so blessed to hear about Jesus. And so whenever I was a boy of about 5 or 6 years of age, I hadn't any life experience. I didn't have really any problems in my life. But one thing I knew was this, that I needed Jesus to forgive me for the wrong things I'd done. And as a young boy, I remember going into my mum and saying, "Mum, I want to ask Jesus into my heart." And she was so happy. We were in my bedroom, and I just got down on my knees, and I remember just saying, "Mum, will you help me with it?" And she said a prayer which I repeated. Now, I would love to say that night there was a firework display, and I felt unbelievable and amazing. But that's not actually how life was. It just continued on as normal. But I now had a peace that actually, even at a young age, I was going to be with Jesus in heaven, no matter what would happen in my life. But fast forward in years, and I could tell you many stories today, folks, but I just want to focus on one thing. I wasn't a very confident person. I wouldn't have said that I was a loud person or I was someone who pushed myself. I was quite nervous. In my life, there was a number of times, particularly a few years of my life, where the devil, who wants to destroy our lives, seen that I was a bit fearful about things, and he had me trapped in fear for a number of years. I would have been embarrassed to say this a few years ago. An irrational fear of darkness. I moved from the town and the town lights out to the countryside, and I got nervous. In one side, it was so real, and on the other side, I thought, how silly am I to even be afraid of the dark? But this kept developing and getting deeper and deeper to the point where I was petrified of the dark. I'd be seeing things. I'd be nearly making things up in my mind, but it appeared real to me. And it got so bad that I couldn't even sleep in my bedroom without having the light on. I remember having terrible nightmares. And I didn't tell my family, I didn't tell anybody, but it was crippling me. I was making really irrational decisions, such as if all the people in my house were away for a weekend, I would not let myself be in the house by myself. So I would make sure that there'd be friends there, or that I would be staying at a friend's house. I was not living life free. But the wonderful thing is, as I sit here tonight, I don't sit here bound by that fear anymore. Even though I wasn't going looking for God to set me free, God came looking for me to set me free. And I remember my sister came to me one day and she says, I was reading a verse. It was in the book of Psalms, chapter 4. And it says, I will both lie down and rest in peace. For you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. And all I can say, folks, is this. As she said that verse out, it was like a light bulb moment. God just broke that chain. And in that moment, I took that verse and I says, God, I am holding this verse as a promise that you want me to lie down and sleep in peace because you alone make me dwell in safety. I can honestly say to you, from that day, the fear of darkness has been gone in my life. There have been other fears in my life that the Lord has set me free from. There have been chains of oppression the devil has tried to hold me down with. Fears and anxieties and wrong thinkings and things that I have blown out of proportion in my mind, and I've allowed the lie of the devil to get a foothold in my life. But yet I have held on to that verse, and God has gave me peace. In my life, I continued through my teenage years and through my early 20s. And one of the other fears that the Lord really set me free from was the fear of man. I wanted to really live as a Christian, but I also was so afraid of what my friends and what people around me would think. If you're not from Fermanagh, you won't understand that it's a small place. And in small places, everyone knows everyone. And so if you come out as a Christian, everyone's going to know it. But I was a wee bit afraid of that. But there came a point in my life the Lord set me free from that fear. But it was actually a really difficult time in my life. I remember in my life I've had many friends down the years, but I became really good friends with a girl, Laura Irvine, a wonderful lady who displayed to me such characteristics of a real Christian. I can't speak highly enough of her. And we became very close. To cut the long story short, there came a day where a good friend of mine gave me a phone call to sadly tell me that Laura had been in a car accident. She had been rushed to hospital. I had never really been faced with anything quite like this. And in that moment, I remember just sitting and literally just putting my hands to my face and putting my head down and really praying to God. And in that moment, I didn't care who was about or anything. It was just like the only thing that mattered was that Laura would get better. Days passed and sadly she passed away. Probably one of the most life-transforming days for me was the day of her Thanksgiving service. I remember everything about it, but in particular, as her earthly body was being laid to rest, I remember in that moment that God came so close to me, but not in a way to just pat me in the back, but to challenge me. Because I was living 1 foot in, I really wanted to be living for God, but I was also 1 foot trying to impress others around me because I was afraid of what they would think if I was really living for God. And in that moment, a verse came to me in the book of Joshua where God says to the people, choose this day who you will serve. And in that moment, God started to speak to me and say, make this your day where you truly decide who you're going to follow. Are you with me or are you with the crowd? And I remember the tears began to come down my face. I asked my friend who I was with that day for his car keys. I was unable to be around people for much longer. Everything, I started to get really hot and I thought I was going to faint or something. I was also a bit embarrassed with crying. And God was speaking so many emotions. And I remember getting down to his car and that day just saying, God, I give you everything. And whatever you want to do in my life, I give it over to you. And so what happened was in my life, I remember giving my testimony in one or two places. I remember my mum phoning me up one day and saying after one of them times, well, how did it go? And I says, Mum, I think this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. I don't know, something feels right about that. And she says, well, pray about it and see what God will do. I remember at that time I was working for George Dean in construction, and very shortly after that I got the P60, or is it the P45? I'm not sure which one, to basically say that my job was finished. Now I was unemployed, and this stirring of God calling me to do something with my life. There had been someone, whenever I was 12 years of age, had spoke over my life, called me out in a meeting. I was in the meeting with my father and they said, young boy, come up here. The lady prophesied over my life and said, this young lad will speak to thousands and will be a preacher. Now, that meant nothing to me at that stage, but my mum had wrote it down and she reminded me about this. And then all of a sudden, people were starting to speak into my life and say, Nathan, I believe that you're to go to Bible college. I believe you should go on and do this. And I sought the Lord, I prayed, and an opportunity opened up for me to go. I am the most unlikely person to end up being a pastor. I have very little education outside now of my degree in theology. I am not one who would have enjoyed being at the front. I was a shy, reserved young boy. But it is amazing that God can take the weak things and sometimes even the despised things and can do something amazing with it. And so I have to rely completely on God because my natural ability is not great. But with God, I can do it. And God has been true to his promise. I remember thinking, how am I going to speak to thousands of people? I'm a pastor in a town of 500 people. Even if everyone in our village came to the church, it still doesn't fulfill that promise. But the incredible thing is this, folks. During the lockdown and through us being able to go online, we reached thousands of people and God kept his promise. So I'm encouraging you, if God is even maybe asking someone who's listening to this to do something that you think is beyond your natural ability, don't be surprised if that is what God's asking you to do, and he will help you. God is interested in you. If you're not a Christian, why not even message this channel and let the team help you with that? And maybe you're a Christian and you're going through a tough time. My encouragement to you is this: don't give up. Don't give in. Don't go back. But keep your eyes on Jesus. And even in those dark times, he will lead you each step of the way. So that's a few simple things about me, and I hope it has encouraged somebody as you have listened. Thanks for listening, and God bless you all.